whenever we play literally anything on the guitar, whether we're just practicing or actually playing music for real, our inevitable technique is the thing that really determines how exactly it will sound, no matter what we play. So, real quick, I just wanted to say that I was very hesitant to put that clip out, and I didn't want anyone to think that my intentions with this clip were like, look what I could do, and just to have it come out kind of sounding sloppy and inaccurate at certain points. I really just wanted to showcase something that for me is very technically challenging and really requires that I tap into a lot of the things that I'm going to be actually talking about in this video. So I still think it's a good example, and like I said, the PDF for this is available, and it includes all the little phrasing things that I may do, like things like hammer-ons and pull-offs at all the right points, and I don't talk about any of that stuff in the video, and I think that the inevitability of those things can come with repetitions and practice, but that stuff definitely matters too, so it could be beneficial to really look at the specifics when you're learning something challenging like that. So if you're interested, it's available. And other than that, I hope you enjoy the video. There can be several individual factors that contribute to our overall technique. And the more certain you are about what these things may uniquely be for you, which comes from experience and repetitions, the easier it will be to consistently play the way that you truly want to play. The element of spontaneity when playing jazz can be overwhelming. And when we're playing, the reality is that we can only focus our mind on one thing at a time. So the more confidently aware we can become of the things that typically guide our playing in the right direction, the less overwhelming it should be, because we're already familiar with what sorts of things we could focus on that will usually produce immediate benefit in the moment for our playing. In this episode, I want to present a short list of factors I've noticed that, for me personally, have a significant impact on my playing, and therefore may be some of the more common things that I'll actually focus on at any given moment for the sake of immediate improvement or correction of some kind. But really quickly, before we get into all that, my name is Derek Plavin, and if you're new to this channel, this is basically like a free online jazz guitar course that unfolds in a logical manner and keeps building upon itself. So if you really want to benefit the most, I would go back to the beginning and try as best as you can to go in order. I know a lot of the videos are long, so what you could do is watch this video here first since you clicked on it, and if you like it, then you can go back and watch maybe the first 3 or 4 episodes, and then you could take it from there. And I'm also available for private lessons and have a lot of available accompanying PDFs to go along with a lot of the videos on this channel, and information for all that stuff can be found on my website as well as my Patreon. Now, before I get into my little list, I want you to realize that even though I'm giving you a bunch of different things to possibly think about that can be beneficial in the moment, the implication is not that you should be trying to think about all of these things in some sort of simultaneous fashion at every given moment. That would be a nightmare. Ideally, you would like all of these things to feel automatic and natural without having to really think about them, and that comes with experience and practice. But no one's perfect, and we're all always working on trying to develop more consistency and control over these sorts of things. So, ideally, your state of mind should really be more like what I've already discussed in episode 49, which you should totally check out, but here's some quick snippets. It's all about developing an awareness of the present moment. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that you're never going to be using any of your intellect or musical skills and knowledge that you might have in the moment when you're actually playing. It's just that, ideally speaking, I think it should mainly only be utilized when needed and in response to something that you might become aware of. So, if and when you are going to be using your musical intellect, you would want to be using it in a way where it's essentially helping you calibrate back to your natural, confident musical flow state. Oftentimes, my human error can cause me to compromise, what is good technique or whatever for me personally, like what works for me. So the more experience I get with this, the easier it is for me to quickly notice when something like that is going on and then quickly make an adjustment so that my technique is better. Alright, so that should give you a clear idea of how you want to be thinking about these kinds of things that I'm about to mention, or whatever unique things you may have noticed that work for you. So I'm going to get into it now, and just an FYI, there isn't really any particular order of significance to how I'm listing these things here. All of these things are important to me, each in their own unique way. That's why they're in this video. But I am going to start with things that we may say are more typically related to technique and what we might expect, and then I'm going to branch out from there. So first, I want to address all the things that relate to my right hand technique, and you may already know that I have my recent video about the George Benson picking style or technique, and that really goes into detail with a lot of that stuff, and generally speaking, that's really the style of picking that I'm trying to go for as best as I can, or at the very least, whatever my inevitable unique version of this picking style may be. Now, obviously, this may not be the exact picking style or right hand technique that everyone is going for, and that's totally cool. So, if you are doing something different, just take what you can from this part and really try to figure out then whatever the subtle nuances of your own right hand technique may be that you notice really seem to make a clear difference in your own results, okay? So whenever I go to play or practice anything, ideally speaking, I really want to strive to try to maintain as close to perfect form with this George Benson picking style as consistently as I can. But in reality, this can often be a lot easier said than done, especially if you haven't gotten a lot of experience with it yet. So at any given moment, I might become aware of any one of these things that I'm about to say here and realize that I'm not really adhering to them properly, and therefore I can try to make some immediate adjustments in an attempt to try to improve the results of my playing right there in that moment. So, some of these things that I'll commonly become aware of in the moment would be things like, am I actually playing with a rest stroke? Am I actually keeping my thumb joint straight the whole time? I might become aware of the angle of my pick and how it's coming across the strings. Another thing that I actually recently started noticing more is kind of like what my index finger is doing and the position of that and its relationship to the pick and how it's being held. And this is interesting because, when I did my George Benson picking style video only a few weeks back, I really didn't talk about this too much, and only recently, within the last few weeks, have I become more consistently aware of this and how it affects my playing. So again, this is just another great example of why I always say the real learning is in the reps. Alright? And finally, another thing that pertains to this is when I'm playing, am I maintaining a steady wrist position or hand position in general? Because like I said in that video, when things start to get tough, and this applies to all the things I just listed, I'll have a tendency to compromise and my hand might start moving positions and I'm not keeping it where it needs to be. And I really think when it comes to all these things, because ideally you just want to be able to consistently maintain this form perfectly, but I think where the problem is coming from at its core is when you go to play things that are difficult. I think if you're not comfortable enough with whatever style of picking you're going for, you may subconsciously start to compromise what you're doing, because it's almost like you think that you're not going to be able to pull it off in whatever this new style of picking is that you're going for, or that would be too difficult. So you're sort of subconsciously tweaking what you're doing in an attempt to be able to try to pull it off. And I think the best thing that you can sort of tell yourself to kind of not let that happen is just remember to basically follow through and have trust in the process. And if you really do maintain the consistency, you'll often get better results. And like I said, that really matters for me for something like, am I keeping a steady wrist position? Because I'll notice that, it seems like it would be harder to play certain things while maintaining that consistency. But if I make myself do it and I become aware of it, I seem to get better results. All right, so that's all I'll say on that for now. Oh, and by the way, another thing that I'll just quickly mention, because I keep forgetting, and this may seem kind of silly, but this still definitely affects your technique and your results and your sound, and that would be the pick and how worn down it is. And I had my whole video on the Fender medium picks, but one thing that I forgot to say is, one thing that I don't like is that they wear down. If you play consistently, they don't last long. So that definitely does actually have an effect on my playing, but you don't want to make excuses, but just be aware of this, because sometimes you'll switch to a fresh medium pick or whatever pick you're using and things will automatically feel so much better. Okay, so the next thing now that I might consider that can have an effect on my technique would be my touch, and that applies to both hands, but maybe I'll just focus on the left hand for now since I just talked about the right hand. And I just talked all about this and really went into detail in the last episode, so I'm not going to do that again here. You can check it out if you haven't seen it, but this could still just be a good reminder to really make sure to try to develop an awareness of your left hand touch and what feels good, and try to notice how you may unintentionally compromise it or stray away from it in certain situations. If you go to play things that are challenging or fast, you'll notice how your left hand will tense up, and that has an effect on your results overall. Alright, so the more aware you are of this stuff, the more you can control it. And that's why I wanted to use an example like the Charlie Parker that I played in this video, because that's one of the hardest things that I practice and really demands everything, not just the touch, everything that I'm talking about in this video, but in regards to the touch, I really have to consistently try to play lightly and not tense up. Alright, so it's just important to consider. Alright, so moving along from this, the next thing that I might become aware of, which is very significant for me, is at any given moment, how aligned with or connected am I to my own authentic musical spirit, which is basically the spirit component of what I'm always talking about with the mind, body, spirit thing. And I always bring this stuff up, and all the real detailed info for this stuff is in episode 17 and 18, and the views on them are still relatively lower than some of the other videos, so I always say really make sure to check these videos out if you haven't seen them, because for me, that topic and the nature of what I talk about in those videos, had a very significant positive impact on my playing. Alright, so definitely check that stuff out. But for now, I'll just say that regardless of if you're improvising something or playing something that was pre-thought out and intentional, either way, the more engaged you are with your spirit and literally feel like the music is coming through you, not just your instrument, the better it's going to sound, because it's just going to contribute to your technique overall, and your feel is most likely going to be a lot better. And the easiest way to do this is basically to try to sing what you play, or to become aware of as if you were singing what you play, alright? So it's very important to see music in this way. Even though you may play an instrument and you aren't a singer, you really got to think of your melodies, especially when you're soloing or playing the melody of a tune, as if they're coming through your body and you're singing them. And, try to realize how that has an effect on your feel even when you're playing your instrument, because it definitely has an impact, okay? So, even when I play something, like a great example would be from last episode with the Freddie Hubbard Destiny's Children solo. That solo opens with this really basic phrase where he's like, those first couple of notes, they're short, they're easy, it's two simple notes, but try to play things like that and compare how they sound singing with them and really being connected versus when you're not. Makes a huge difference, alright? So definitely be aware of this stuff, it's very important. Okay, from here, the next thing that I might think about, which might be a little bit more situational, is how exactly am I perceiving the time or feeling the beats within the meter? And this is another thing that I made a whole video on that you could check out if you haven't seen it, but just to keep it kind of brief for now, one of the most common scenarios where this will really become important is when you're playing really up-tempo, fast tunes, and it's important to learn how to feel the bigger beats so that you can basically feel relaxed, because, obviously, if you're not feeling relaxed, that will translate over to your technique and cause the feel and the results and everything to be compromised. So, you want to feel relaxed when you're perceiving the time, even at a fast tempo. So, the Charlie Parker Saw Nuff example is a great example for this too. So, if I just play a little bit of it just to kind of show you how I would feel the tempo, on this recording, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's my new backbeat, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a lot easier to keep up with the phrases and hear them if you're doing it like this, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? You feel it like that, it's going to be a lot easier, alright? So there's a lot of other stuff that I can say on that topic, but we'll just leave it there for now, alright? Be aware of that as well. Okay, now, the next thing is probably the one thing on this list that is probably the least directly related to your technique, but I feel like it would still be good to be on this list because it's something that I could, become aware of in the moment and I could make adjustments. And that would basically be, how well do I think I'm doing in the moment as far as being able to confidently convey the harmony of whatever I'm playing, alright? And that's not to say, that you have to articulate every single change or harmony in every tune. I've made a lot of videos about that, but it's really just more about, like, am I keeping it tight and clean as far as being able to, confidently keep the harmony moving accurately, but, keeping the time as well, because a lot of times people tend to focus on one or the other and then the other one gets messed up, alright? So obviously for me, the thing that always helps with that is the chord tones and half notes exercise, but if I'm kind of noticing that I'm, not really hitting the changes in time good in the moment when I'm playing, I could play chord tones and half notes, or just kind of try to think more simply and get my harmonic foundation together so that I can, play more comfortably and have better time. But usually if I'm noticing things like this is a good cue for me to basically do that exercise and practice and, become more fluent with that, because it's just like a skill, like all these other things. If you don't use it, you lose it, okay? And then finally, the last thing that we may want to think about at any given moment, which is obviously extremely important, is, are we listening to what's going on around us? Are we listening to the band or the musicians that we're playing with? Are we even listening to ourselves? And this has a huge effect on our technique because, just like everyone always says, if you shift the focus on what the other musicians are playing and you try to play things in a way where you're really trying to make them pop and sound good, that's going to make you play better, it's going to make you feel better, so that has a direct impact on your technique, alright? So, I'm talking about all these things because all these things may sound obvious, but there's so many things to keep track of, and, it could be easy to forget, alright? So that's why I thought it was good to kind of put all these things together in a little compiled list. So I'm just gonna leave it there today, and if anyone has any questions or anything they want to say, just put it in the comments. I'm here to help. And in the next episode,
hope you're ready for the next episode. Hey,
I'm happy to say that we're finally going to be closing this chapter of things that I've been talking about with all these recent videos. We're still focusing on the body, but now we're going to talk more about, like individual phrases and bits of language and whatnot, and how do I work all these things into the body. So there's going to be a lot to say within this big topic as well, so I hope you're excited for that. Alright, so that's it. If you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate it if you gave it a like and consider becoming a subscriber, as well as a contributor to Patreon, where you'll get all the PDFs on this channel for only $5 a month. And if you think anyone else would enjoy this content, please share it with them as well. And I will see you guys in episode 62.
Swinging and playing the blues. That's what we about.